Cyber Reapers. Hello, Cyber Reapers. So, tonight, or today, whenever, wherever you are, I would like to talk about a book. Now, this one is a little harder to explain, I think, because there's some obstacles in comparison to my usual books that I review. Just in the sense of there's a lot that happens in this book that is not mentioned in the blurb, but the blurb mentions stuff that happens way later in the book at the same time. So I'm just gonna kind of try to stick mostly to the premise, but also cover some of the overarching expectations you can kind of set for yourself before going into this book. Because there were a few expectations of mine based on the marketing of the book that the book didn't quite follow through on. So I want to make it clear I do think this is a good book. But I was struggling the whole time because I thought it was going to be something different. But then by the time I got to the end, I was like, oh, this is really good. I like this. But I could see how if someone is walking in thinking it's more of a thriller, it's not a thriller, it's more of a historical fiction book. It does have a couple of murders in it, but there's not a lot of mystery element to that either. It's just kind of part of the bunch of tragedies that happen in the book. So, yeah, it's kind of... I'm gonna try to talk ambiguously about stuff not mentioned in the blurb, but at the same time, there are just some things that I think should be mentioned for the sake of talking about this book in the way that I do. On the format of this channel, I guess, you know? So, let's get into it. What is this book? This book is called Rainbow Black by Maggie Thrash. I would call this a historical fiction book as it takes place in the 1980s to the 2000s. About 2005, I think, is where the book ends, if I remember right. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it extends a little into the 2010s, technically. But most of the book takes place whenever the main character is young, as in their preteens to teenage years. So it takes place primarily in the 1980s to the 1990s, and then maybe about the last third of the book or so takes place when the character is an adult in their late 20s. So, just to kind of set that up, I was kind of reading through a lot of it going, I didn't expect this much to take place in the younger years because the blurb mentions something that happens like way later in the book. So I was kind of surprised, but again, the book itself, very good. So I'm hoping to just kind of describe like, hey, here are like the good things about it, and here's kind of what to expect, so that maybe the marketing tags or the blurb doesn't quite throw you off, maybe. So, yeah. And I get why the blurb kind of wrote it, or why they wrote it the way that it is, because it mentions some of the exciting stuff, but at the same time, this is one of those books where it's more of just like the experience of reading the book and the character's life that makes it really interesting and gripping. It's not really like, I don't think there's a strong like later hook, or it's the entire thing is like the draw, not necessarily the premise. So yeah, now that I've kind of talked ambiguously about that, yeah, let's start with our main character because she is the focus of the whole story. We follow Lacey. Lacey is our main character. From a young age, she knew she was a lesbian. She grew up in the 1980s, 1990s in New Hampshire, and she's very outdoorsy, and she grew up with a couple of hippie parents and just kind of learned to enjoy the outdoors. Well, not necessarily just enjoy, but to really be in tune with, like, knowing how to survive, you know, knowing how to, what are some of the things, like, I'm trying to remember, because the distinction between, like, a cattle farm and what Lacey grew up with was very important to her, so I'm trying to remember exactly how she described it. But, like, they kept goats, they kept, kind of some other animals, and Lacey knew how to, you know, how to take a dead rabbit and, you know, figure out how to eat it. I'm not going to describe all the stuff to that, but just, like, she knew how to survive. And so she was growing up. Her family had a little bit of dysfunction because of her older sister, and I'm not going to talk about her a whole bunch, but the book does. Just to be clear, she's an important character, the older sister. But, like, yeah. For reasons, I won't talk about her, but she's important. And the family has just kind of this dynamic where they overall, like, seem fairly normal, fairly healthy. Here and there's some, like, weird things that go on, some arguments and stuff. And Lacey, at 13 years old, or, you know, in her preteens, she doesn't quite see behind the curtain yet of some of the darker parts of what's going on around her family. So, one of these things is her parents had, like, this preschool daycare kind of a place where they took care of kids, you know, and that unfortunately resulted in them getting false accusations of being inappropriate toward children. And so that with the rise of the Satanic Panic in the 90s, they became really infamous. So a lot of kids started coming forward with these wild stories about what Lacey's parents supposedly did to them. And so the parents were arrested, and this trial just kept going on and on and on for so much time. It was draining Lacey, it was draining her older sister, it was draining her parents, of course. Their whole family just kept, like, having to go through so much, being bombarded with a system, the judicial system, being not, I mean, it just was not kind to them. And, yeah. So, Lacey in school was having a bad time, and just a lot of bad stuff going on. And eventually even, someone close to Lacey was, killed for just being close to this case. And so Lacey's life just kept going downhill, downhill, downhill. And the reason I kept reading was because I really just wanted to see Lacey have a moment of genuine happiness. Because this whole book really was just full of depressing moments. Now, I don't just read stuff. In fact, I don't really like reading depressing stuff all that much, because it just reminds me of real life. But at the same time, this book really did point out very specific parts of real life that were so, I think, so important to remind people about. Like, for example, how little care prison system, especially if those people in prison are minorities or marginalized people. It's this book really touched on a lot of stuff, and I have some past of just like people I know who have been hugely what's a polite term for it? They've been, the judicial system failed them, let's just say that, and the police failed them, and it just keeps happening over and over again to different people in my life, enough to where I'm going, there's something wrong here, there's something so very wrong. And historically it's been the same, you know, reading a book like this, it kind of reminds me, yep, it's been like this for decades, and that's rooted in so many other things that have to do with the founding of the United States and just colonialism and racism and so many layers of just so many bad, depressing, negative, real things. So I will warn you, if you decide to pick up this book, there's not a lot of happy moments. I will say, however, I think the ending definitely makes or breaks whether a person feels like reading through this whole book is worthwhile. To me, I felt like it was. When I got to the ending, there were only like 2 things I wanted from this book at the end, and both of them happened, so I was pleased, and I was going, okay, I feel like I can take a breath of relief now that this book is, like, I've gotten through its entirety, and it felt like a whole, complete thing that I think was worth the read. So, just like as a heads up, it's a little, I think I have some caveats, some warnings about, like, the expectations going into this book. But, like, I do recommend it. It's just, if you don't want to read a bunch of depressing stuff, I completely understand. Because this book does feel very real, in the sense of it feels like, almost like you're reading about a biography of somebody. And just, yeah, it's a lot. It's intense. So that's the feel of the book. And there's one more thing of just like Lacey's kind of overall plot line that the blurb somewhat mentions. So Lacey's been going through all this bad stuff. Eventually, she just kind of has enough of her life, and so she runs away, and she goes to find the one person she really has connection with anymore, and this person was one of her friends growing up who, like, their paths kept crossing, like, back and forth, of them being in and out of each other's lives. But by this point in time, or by a certain point in time, the main character Lacey goes, no, I need this other person in my life, and I need to make sure she's okay. And so this is like her best friend, her crush, or her, like, somebody she has a strong bond with. And I'm gonna call this other person Gwen, even though they didn't go by Gwen at this point in the story. But Gwen is a trans woman, and she was in an unsafe environment. So Lacey went to go find Gwen, and they found each other. But, like, in order to escape, they committed a crime that would haunt them for years. And so that's the blurb part that's mentioned, like, in the blurb, but takes place later. And then after that is kind of the rest of the book, where it's Lacey's late 20s, Lacey and Gwen, their late 20s, and so yeah, that's where, from there, you get the resolution, for the last third of the book or so. is just like you're following Lacey's life for these like decades, you know. And I think it was definitely worth the read. I think the ending did definitely provide me with the things I wanted. And I think it might be a bit of a spoiler to say what I wanted, so I'm gonna leave those out. But it had to do with romance and the resolution to like judicial system problems. So I'll say that. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can say. Oh, I mean, of course, I guess just about the characters themselves. So Lacey, even though like Lacey and Gwen both like did stuff sometimes that I was going, please don't do that, you're making a mistake. Or like there are a million other ways of doing this. But at the same time, a lot of the portion of the book, they are minors. They're minors with trauma. So they are doing their best. And it's they go through a lot. So yeah. But I absolutely love them. I love them both. And I love their relationship in particular. And just yeah. And I just really wanted like happiness for the both of them. Asking for happiness from this book is maybe a little too much, but at least peace is something. Peace is an option. And I was pleasantly surprised that some other characters ended up finding that too, even after all they'd been through. So it's, yeah, there's a lot in this book, there's a lot. And I'm trying to avoid stepping on landmines of like talking about things that are not mentioned in the blurb and maybe are like a little too far away from stuff that I should be talking about, because I'm just trying to kind of give you the general vibe of the book and the premise. But there's so much in this book that I want to talk about. It feels like one of those books that I read in school. I don't know if I've already said that already, I'm sorry if I have, but it feels like one of these books that like I would read in high school, and then we'd have like a Socratic seminar where we'd all talk about our thoughts on it. This is kind of one of those books I would have wanted to like have done that with. Yeah, so there's so much. Let me try to get back on track with my notes. Okay, so I actually did cover most of everything in my notes. There are a couple things I missed though. For one, just so you know, there are slurs in the book that match the time period that the book takes place in. It's not... Anytime I read any of the slurs, like particularly when talking about the ones that refer to identities I belong to, I didn't feel like it was an offensive thing from the author. I felt like it was just like part of it. It made sense as part of the time, even though I can understand why it can be shocking for some people. So just as a heads up, there are some queer related slurs in the book, and I think there were some other slurs, maybe some ableist ones as well. So yeah, possibly racial ones too, except I don't think they touched a lot on racism directly. It was more like queerphobia kind of stuff. And also just all the characters felt so real because of their flaws. Like everybody was flawed. There was not a single character I would even say it was anywhere close to perfect, or idealized, you know. Even Gwen, who I absolutely love, she's definitely not perfect. Yeah. There are reasons I could say why, but that leads to major spoiler territory, so I'm not gonna do that. But there's just... there's so much about this book. Yeah. It gripped me so much. I've been reading it the past few days, hoping for a moment of genuine happiness for the main character that didn't feel tainted by, like, some other, like, horrible thing, you know? But there were just so many horrible things happening. It sounded like I was reading about one of my family members, you know? Like, one of my extended family members. Because it sounded like some of their lives, and I'm like, deeply impressed with how the author captured all of the feelings having to do with all of that. I forgot to mention too, there were also, how do I say this without potential spoiler? The book also tackled stuff related to drug addiction, so, yeah. The book gets messy, there's a lot of messiness. I think there's so much messiness among the characters. It's crazy. It's a lot. But I think it's all very good. It definitely gripped me. It was a worthwhile read to me, and I feel a little changed because of it. And I feel a little more emboldened too, because there are certain stories that just kind of remind me, yeah, this is why I write stuff. This is why I fight in any way that I can, to just keep opening my mind to learning more about other people and to trying to fight for the lives of other people and myself, my own communities, because of the experiences that are described in this book. Even if this book is fiction, it describes very real things. A lot of dark topics in this book, so I'm gonna give you a warning about that as well, in case that wasn't clear with the other things I've already said. There's a lot. And I think that's all I can say without going into spoilers. So yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna end with. This one felt very cryptic, like I was kind of like dodging thoughts here and there to try to avoid saying certain things that might lead to plot-related stuff that I shouldn't mention. But there's I better not say there's a lot again. Okay. I will just pause there. And thank you, because you have been an awesome listener. And yeah, I hope that whatever you do next, wherever you go next, that it is fun and or relaxing and or worthwhile to you, and ideally all three. Okay, bye. This episode was extra ramble